Much for keeping on time as well. We've got about 10 minutes. This was a bit of a sort of squeeze session this afternoon. So what I'm going to do is we're going to open it up for questions, thoughts. If you have them for specific panel members, please say. If I could ask you to say who you are when you ask your question or make your comment, and also try and keep it succinct so that a few people get a chance to talk. Thank you.
Hello. I enjoyed all the speeches, they were fantastic, and the example of the children at school was very close to home, so really great to hear that. But I actually wanted to talk about social value, and to ask, why do you think there's been this low take-up? Is it because, for example, we found in our area, we're developing a model to try and do it with one of our district councils that's actually working very, very well. And our experience is that people don't understand it. People don't, it's social value sounds boring, jargony, dull, public sector, not for us, not in the community. And so I think, so I wondered to the extent to which, is that the barrier, or is it sort of state resistance? What's going on, do you think?
Is this on? Yeah. Was I shouting earlier? No. So I think in terms of the policy itself, I think that it's not very prescriptive. I think it's quite an open, some might say vaguely kind of worded piece of legislation and piece of policy. And I think that, for some people that's a blessing and others it's a curse. Some people need to have very clear instruction on how to apply it, and others don't. So I think at a very high level that's one of the issues with it. But I think my answer is to that, just get on with it. And it's not a case of necessarily getting on with it and begging for forgiveness, but it's not far off that. So that's what I would suggest. Your procurement guys will always come down and say, you can or can't do this. So just, I would say, kind of get on with it. I think that over the years, so it's been 5 years now, it's quite a long time. I wouldn't say you could call it a new thing anymore. But I think that two of the main issues that have slowed it down, number one is the kind of the measurement question, which I think is a bit of a red herring, to be perfectly honest. I think, on the one hand you've got incredibly kind of complex and smart SROI type tools, and you can't run those for every single procurement, you just can't do it. On the other hand, you've got kind of online calculators, some of which are pretty good. The HACT model is pretty good, and Social Value Portal, again, is pretty good, but then there are also some snake oil merchants out there too. So you have to be very careful about what you use. But I think measurements held it up. And then, of course, the elephant in the room with social value is who pays for it. And I think that there's a huge... there's still a lack of understanding. I think, again, apologies to any procurement people in the room, but I think there is a lack of understanding and belief in what social value is and how it can be made to work. I think there are sort of perverse incentives. I mean, government's being asked to save money on the one hand and then boost value on the other, which is a challenge. But I would say measurement and who pays for it are things that have slowed it down. But it's coming and it's not going away. So, is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. I really agree about the complexity thing. One of our local authorities has come up with what I might term as a 5-dimensional spreadsheet that you have to try and use if you want, and it's ridiculous. So yeah, it's very helpful to hear people.
Can I just add then on social value? I agree with everything that's been said in terms of positive encouragement. We hear some really awful tales within my membership of social value criteria being misused to seek subsidy, pay to play, discounts on prompt payment. And I'm part of the the BCS Crown Rep advisory group. One of the things we've been discussing in that, and I'm trying to encourage my members to do, is to use the mystery shopper function at the Cabinet Office, where you can report bad commissioning practice. And it's very clear, Social Value Act misuse is bad commissioning practice. It can be stopped. So, I just wanted to add, we've got some teeth in the negative end.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Got Wendy at the front here.
It's not about social value, it's about voices getting heard. And I recognise that there is diversity within the CVS movement, but not, if you look out at the sea of faces, you won't see many BME faces. And I just wonder, do you think that's as a result of racist recruitment processes in the sector, or do the AME sector organise separately? And if it is about racism, how can we change that?
Well, I've got a contribution to make rather than thinking that it would solve everything to do with structural inequality and lack of diversity. But we do run a campaign called Open to All. We're pretty clear that charities have no good reason to be requiring degrees for any jobs that we do. And you know, I mean, there might be the odd registered social work post. It's not about being anti-qualification. It's about the fact that we've fallen into, like slow boiling frogs, the habit of filtering job opportunities by saying degree level is a requirement for a job when it's not. And actually, you know, I've got a degree, but nothing I did in my degree taught me how to be a chief exec. So all the rest is game. But you know, we have to say that there must be something in our recruitment practices. There must be. And whether it's only about race, it's really about class. This is the most middle class sector I know, and I count myself in that. And going to university as a minimum requirement is the most middle class thing I've ever heard of.
Somebody at the back who'd like to speak? Get the microphone over there, please. Thank you. Oh, yeah, in the green t-shirt. Thanks. I've got two microphones. So, it's that guy there. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Hackney CVS, a CVS working in London. I mean, the speakers were really amazing actually about different issues that are also affecting the charities actually working from civil side. And also Kathy mentioned about the effectiveness of interventions, whether it's positive, and where is the data is backing it up, and also in terms of commissioning services. So when we're talking about commissioning services, how you actually define that there's a gap in the service, and also you base the outcomes of the commissioning basically based on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, my question is how we as a voluntary sector can actually feed into that and also provide the local knowledge and the evidence, so we fill in that gap to inform the commissioners of what's needed to be done, rather than actually chasing the contracts or the commissioning processes to achieve outcomes that are set out by others.
I think you're asking for the Holy Grail question, because that's the one that we all want to solve, right? I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that they were just scaling up a programme of work around lifelong learning, which 10 years ago they'd scaled back down again, and now it was suddenly a priority again. So it's this idea that things become a priority, are deprioritised, become a priority again, when actually that need would have always been there. And if we have a model which is much more conversational and much more, let's understand our communities together and bring a range of perspectives to do so, then we can figure out what's needed, and we don't have to necessarily dream up a new initiative, throw some money at it, and then it's a firework approach. So I guess the crucial piece there would be how you can start to have those conversations on an ongoing basis with, as I was trying to describe earlier, other actors in the system around the key areas.
I think we've got time for one more. There's two more actually. So there's this person at the back, and then this lady here, and that's going to be the last. It's a brave person that stands between people and their lunch. So I think we'll just take a couple, if that's okay with the rest of you, and then we'll wind up. Okay, thank you.
I'll be brief. David Fannin, Lincolnshire, CVS. I agree with Dan in the Social Value Act. I think it's problematic in the way it's used. But my question is for Ian. In Lincolnshire, for example, we're just about to commission, the County Council is about to commission an integrated lifestyle support service linked to healthier lifestyles, STP programs and things like that. And the commissioning side are talking the language of enlightenment, changing people's lives, integration, outcomes, working together, and the procurement side are talking about numbers, and it's the two absolutely different ends of the message. So the question for Ian is, between moving from that transactional to the more enlightened thinking, what can NAVCA do? What would your advice to NAVCA be to help us at the local level mobilise the arguments for enlightenment rather than transactional thinking?
Can you just hold on to that question for a minute? Could we just have the other question? Thank you.
It's Karen from Reading Voluntary Action. And I was really struck by just sort of stringing together everything we just heard. I think I'm adding to the previous question, which is simply knowing what's right, knowing what's being done that's good, but thinking about the way in which activities are happening through platforms rather than through organisations, and what on earth does that mean? And how does that tie into thinking around how any of this stuff's paid for, particularly in the peculiar environment we're in at the moment? So I suppose it's similarly what can NAVCA be doing, but thinking about what does it mean for us trying to support and nurture and grow voluntary action if we start thinking about platforms rather than organisations?
Okay, I'll kick off and I'll try and join some of this together. The move towards more enlightened commissioning and literature, well, the fact that you're having these conversations is a good thing. What can NAVCA do? Well, I think there's something which starts to tie together the need to have a sort of a moral values-based approach that moves us away from those sort of accountancy-driven value-for-money type exercises where if only you can evidence you've got 1,000 people through the door and you can divide that by the cost of doing so, you've got some sort of sense of value. We need to move beyond that. We need to think fundamentally about social value, but in its widest context. And I think there's an exercise, I flippantly talk at the RSA about public entrepreneurs. There are people in our public services trying to grapple with this stuff, but the system often says no. And what we need to do is to find ways of starting to mobilise behind a movement for change that says there is a different way of doing this, because we know that it's necessary, it's the only way you can do this. And I think what I'm keen to do is to try and mobilise a coalition of people that are trying to move in this direction. So that includes NAVCA, that includes others in the room, and it's about figuring out what good looks like and how we can share innovative practice.
I think all three of our panellists would like to say a little bit something to your question, and so I'll invite them to do that, and maybe closing comments as well. Thanks.
Yeah, just a very, very quick comment about platforms and tech, and that's what I do, but I hate to come to these places and almost talk about that because it just sounds, it's like someone else is banging that drum. But I think, very, very simply, for me, the way to explain why platforms can work, and they shouldn't, it isn't the default, but why they can work is that they're simply about connecting organisations for mutual benefit. So if there's an organisation that wants something on one hand, and there's another organisation that can deliver it on the other, there's just a matching thing that platforms can do, which can be done in real life, but of course it can be done at much greater scale and faster. So that's all I would say, that the kind of benefits of a platform. But again, I would stress that this isn't a panacea, it's not the cure-all to all of the challenges that we've been discussing today.
Just building on that, I think there are ways in which sort of platform-based models actually can just help with the more sort of rational allocation of resources, where you already know what you want to do and how you're going to measure it, and that's one thing. I think where the challenge might come is that if we're talking about sort of actually decentralising power and allowing people to kind of connect and organise in different ways, I think that will be in tension with the idea that somebody can set objectives for you, come in and tell you how you're going to be able to measure them. And actually the mindset about giving away power, that extends to power to decide what it is that you're trying to do and how you're going to measure it. And then that raises all sorts of questions about accountability. Are public sector commissioners ever going to be comfortable with that? Do we need to talk about new accountability mechanisms and different ways of using transparency? And I'll just leave with the thought, I was talking to somebody the other day about this exact problem, and he said he talked to a funder who was really excited about kind of decentralised models, and had reached out to a small sort of platform organisation and said, we want to give you some money, what can we do? And they said, give us the strong expletive money and then strong expletive off.
Do you get any money? I don't know about different diverse kinds of platforms. To quote my friend and colleague Toby Lowe, outcomes are real. They are a real thing. I'm not trying to disabuse anyone that we can't do well or badly, and we shouldn't be asking whether we do. Outcomes are emergent properties from complex systems. So you know about them once you've gone through a process. You do not achieve them by setting them 2 years ahead and then looking at them. Because that's where all of the different ways in which you might actually be able to do something to help become blinkered out and become somebody else's job. So, for funders, public or charitable, what I would say is that you need to be looking for organisations that have clear inbuilt habits around learning, critical reflection and change. If you have an organisation that is gathering evidence, taking critical feedback, reflecting on whether we're doing the right thing, allowing people to adapt as we go along because different needs are presenting, what you need to know is that they are learning and they will be able to present you with evidence of what they've learned along the way, rather than saying, what do you promise to deliver and you need to tell us that you did. If that's not deliverable, it's not true. So what you're paying for is data, and often false data.
Thank you very much. So I propose we close now for lunch. Could you join me please in thanking our speakers? Hope you have a lovely lunch and continue the discussions. Cheers.